delighted to introduce to you Sylvester Feddes. He is country president and Pharma head of Colombia, Novartis. With 20 years of pharmaceutical experience in general management, marketing and sales at local, regional and global levels across the EU, the US and emerging markets. Sylvester is speaking to us today on leading diversity and inclusion in a virtual environment. Please welcome Sylvester Feddes.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for this kind introduction, and a big welcome to all of you. I'm really so pleased to be here with you and talking about leading diversity and inclusion in a virtual environment, because when it comes to D&I, that's really a true passion of mine. But before I start, I want to say to everybody, Happy Pride Day, Happy Pride Month. I think that this is a time where we celebrate our uniqueness and our differences. And actually that is the core, I think, of this talk. How can we make sure that we not just look at our differences, but really celebrate the uniqueness that we all bring to the table? So what I would like to do for today, we have about half an hour, is start a little bit talking about myself, very short, but I think when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we all have biases, we all have our own glasses. So it's, I think, helpful to understand where I come from. So when I have certain opinions, you know where that comes from, the context. Then I would love to talk a little bit about diversity and inclusion. I've noticed that sometimes there's a little bit of confusion about these concepts. And then why it's actually priority for all of us and for companies, organizations. And then we'll dive into what does it mean, or what does it mean for me in Colombia as I came here 6 months before the pandemic hit. We all had to go virtual. Afterwards, a few reflections, and then I would love to open it up for Q&A. I don't know, Alicia, how we can do that, if there's a chat, etc. But I'm really happy to answer any questions that I can address. So if that is all good, then let's dive right into it. So to Alicia's point, so my name is Sylvester. I am from the Netherlands. I'm a Master of Economics. I did my MBA later on at the university in the US. And about, I think that when I think about what has guided me throughout these years is really this purpose to help people and to support. And as I was reflecting on that, I came across Novartis 14 years ago and decided to join that company because I very, let's say, focused around making sure that how can we improve and prolong the life of the people across the world and of our patients. And that really resonated with me. So 14 years ago, I started at Novartis and have been working with them across, as I said, different continents, different countries, and different positions. Currently, I'm heading up the organization in Colombia. But actually, my journey of diversity and inclusion started much earlier. I think that the passion really came when I was at a younger age. And I don't know how it's for all of you, but when you're young, I lived in rural part of the Netherlands, so really where it's all green and all the cattle is. And it was not necessarily a diverse population. It was a very homogeneous population of farmers, etc. So at those times, being a small kid coming from outside of that area, I did feel these emotions of loneliness, of not feeling appreciated, being different to a certain extent, and occasionally being discriminated. And having those feelings, it really marked me that this is something that I don't want, but I don't want other people to feel as well. So this is where I started to really understand what is diversity, but also what does diversity do when it's not inclusive. And I think that that's sometimes we make that differences, the difference between diversity and inclusion. And we'll come back to a little bit later, but it was really there when I really got passionate about how can we build diverse teams, how can we lead them inclusively to really make sure that we get the best out of everybody. The uniqueness on the table, how do we make sure that we capture that from each person? And this is not something for me that is just the right thing to do. Our society is diverse. It's also just normal and good business sense. When you look at a recent study from Harvard, they actually measured that diverse organizations and diverse teams They have a 90% higher innovation revenue. So again, it's not just doing about doing the right thing. It's also around making sure that you do the right thing for the business. And I think that this is something that has driven me for the last years until now and will continue to drive me. And that is also from a context that as you reflect on your own organizations, how diverse are they and how do they reflect the society? In Novartis, globally, we have a global footprint, but also in Colombia. What we try to do is make sure that our organizations, our people, our leadership teams reflect the society. If we have a diverse enough organization that resembles society, most likely we will understand society better, their challenges, but also their opportunities. So again, making sure that you build diversity, reflecting the diversity of the society where you operate in, likely will have a better business impact. But then going to the topic, what is this diversity and inclusion? And we talk about it, D&I, you hear it everybody. It's a pretty buzzy concept nowadays. And for me, it really is actually simple. At its core, for me, it's simple. It's making sure that you have an environment where everybody can feel themselves and bring their own selves to the work floor. It's very important to distinguish between diversity and inclusion. Diversity for me is really something that we can mandate, something that we can execute easily against. It's about the easiest, perhaps not the easiest, but the most common is the difference between gender, male, female. How can we balance that? But in my view, when the diversity goes way beyond gender, it goes around experiences, academia, what is your background, where do you come from, what is your nationality, in how many countries have you lived, what do you bring to the table? This is all part of the diversity. To a certain extent, depending on the country, you can measure it and you can hire for it. Inclusion goes a little bit further. Inclusion is really around how can we make sure that we nurture an environment of inclusion? How can we build a culture of inclusion that actually makes sure that that diversity can really flourish? Without inclusion, it's very difficult to leverage the benefit of diversity. And I think this is very important to highlight. So why is it so important to have diversity across our organizations? And why does everybody talk about it? And what is the big challenge around diversity and inclusion? When I think about it, the first thing that comes to mind is when we talk about and we look at the last 3 years, the amount of transformation, change that has happened in the world, across our industries and companies is extraordinary. And the problems get every time more complex. The world gets more complex, gets more integrated. In order to make sure that we capture those opportunities or we manage the risks, we need to have teams that are able to think beyond the norm. If you have homogeneous organizations, people with the same backgrounds, same way of thinking, most likely when it comes towards opportunities and challenges, you will get similar types of solutions. When you have a diverse organization, most likely there's much more angles that teams can approach towards a similar opportunity or a similar challenge, which allow the organization to capture much better, more effectively the opportunity or prepare for those risks and challenges. So I think really for me, diversity goes at the core at the way we work across an organization. The other thing that we have to take into account is that the run for talent, the fight for talent is intensifying. Good people are not necessarily easy to find. Diversity is crucial in talent development, in talent attraction, in talent retainment. That's what we have seen, especially also in Novartis. At this point in time, when you have job interviews, and I don't know how is that in your case, but in my case, and you see it also in the literature, about 1 out of 2 candidates will ask something around the culture, around diversity of the culture, the inclusiveness of the culture. It can come in different questions, but it's present. Not having clear answers, a clear policy, a clear vision around that will possibly result that some people will not choose your company or your team to work for. So again, diversity, inclusion, important in talent attraction, talent retainment. And then also when it comes to leadership, something when I go and I look at other companies, I talk to colleagues, what you sometimes see is that they do a lot to create a diverse context, a diverse organization. When you look at the leadership team, it's pretty homogeneous. Again, in background, gender, race, etc. So I think it's very important that we have to start with ourselves as leaders. We need to make sure that our teams are diverse as well. In order to build truly high-performance teams that can prepare the organization and navigate the organization through the uncertainties that we're living, can capture the opportunities in this uncertainty and actually create a certain type of stability for the organization, we have to have diverse teams. We have to have people with different mindsets, people that allow themselves to be themselves, speak up, agree and disagree, in order to, in the end, come towards the best solutions. It starts with the leadership team. And then I think finally, and that is just perhaps on the personal note, it's just a lot of fun. Working with different people, different cultures, and diverse teams, every day is enriching, every day you learn, and every day you laugh. So I think that also for the culture on the workplace, I think diversity and inclusion is very important. So we now switch a little bit. So what does it mean in reality? Just wanted to share a little bit of my experience as I came to Colombia. When I arrived in Colombia, I came from the US. I found an organization that was still, I would say, a bit more classical, a bit more managed top-down. The leadership team was very homogeneous, similar background, similar universities. Gender balance was very good, by the way, very strong. But it was pretty much, let's say, all from a similar, same type of background. Talent development was not necessarily transparent. And I think there was also a lot of symbolism around leadership team versus the rest of the organization. The leader had a big office, the rest of the organization not. The leadership team would sit in front when there were presentations. When there was lunch, there were different tables. So as I came in, I felt that this was not the right way to really make sure that we create an environment where we all felt that we could bring our best self towards the environment. So the first thing we did was make sure that we got rid of some of those symbolisms. I got rid of my office. Nobody had a fixed spot anymore. We went to open workspace and people could sit wherever they want. We would have integration lunches, etc. We would go to make sure that we would sit on different floors as leadership team. So I think that created an enormous amount of closeness towards the leadership team. On the other end as well, I made very conscious changes in the leadership team and hired specifically for other capabilities as well. I hired in foreign people in Colombia. We hired in people from different universities. We did all kinds of messaging around that to make sure that people also understood why we did that. We were very transparent around why certain people got certain roles and about the process, the selection process, so that people felt included and understood why certain decisions were taken. The other thing that we did, we invested a lot in self-awareness of our leaders. For me, it's crucially important that in order to be able to lead inclusively, you need to understand where your own biases are. Where do you come from? How do you make decisions? What are some of your pain points? If you understand yourself better, you will appreciate much more the uniqueness of the others. Doesn't mean that you always agree, but at least you respect it. You'll be able to lead the people in that way as well. And I think then also what we did in Novartis was we had some specific programs, for example, choice with responsibility, where people were able to manage with a manager from where they would work, which hours they would work, which increased satisfaction, but also the opportunities to manage better your work and your life balance. Very well appreciated also younger generations that have kids, younger families. We also launched an initiative around pay transparency. So be really transparent of what are you being paid, where do you benchmark within the organization and externally. And we noticed that there were some differences. So we also, people who were below, we increased to the level where they should be. Because again, in Colombia, it's a country of some inequalities. So sometimes also what we've noticed that people from certain university would enter with higher pay than from other universities, for public universities, for example. So we really focus on what is the job to be done, and that is how we pay. Very, very well received, very difficult for the managers as well to have the conversations. So we also supported our management team with concrete tools to support them in this. We also faced quite some challenges. One is, especially as we came into the pandemic, of course, everything that I discussed was helping us to actually smooth into the pandemic. We already work more remotely. We build a trust between managers and associates. So as a pandemic hit, we were actually pretty well prepared, we thought. But then what we also noticed was that how difficult it is to maintain the sense of purpose throughout the pandemic. How can we make sure that people are united? So we really focused around the purpose of the company, prolonging and improving the lives of people. We try to find ways for teams to come together virtually. But what we also noticed is that although we prepared a lot, there are still a lot of people that actually did not necessarily agree with the policy around diversity and inclusion. You can imagine that if you work 20, 30 years and you came to a certain position, and now you are the boss, and there's a clear distinction between a boss and a leader. For me, a boss is somebody that executes, somebody that gives orders and delegates, versus a leader that brings the organization towards a common vision, supports the people, and gets rid of obstacles. That also means that you're at the same level with your teams a lot of times. And for some people, that was just difficult. They love their title, they love their office, they love the fact that they now had a sense of, I am realized. In that sense, we did lose some people, which I think was a right thing because the culture is evolving. And I think that these people were much better in other types of cultures. So that is something just to be aware of, that can happen. So those are some of the challenges that we did face. And when it comes to the pandemic as such, as I said, we were pretty well prepared. We have seen that there's quite some talent attraction happening because of our culture, because of our flexibility. Younger people, younger talent, different generations, young parents, and I'm talking specifically not just about women, but also men. We have to recognize that a lot of men nowadays also want to be very much involved in childcare. We actually also make sure that both men and women have the same maternity, paternity leave rights. And all of this has helped in the pandemic. Now, what is a key challenge that we're now currently facing is, as we have attracted all this talent, as we actually have done a lot, that we could work and thrive in this, this virtual environment. Now that we go back to the hybrid type of environment, we do see that it's difficult for quite some people to accept again, having to go back to the office, having metrics being measured on performance. So we do see that, that there's actually also a similar thing that we did to prepare the organization in terms of change management, working in the virtual world. We actually have to do the same thing in helping people getting back into this hybrid world. We have hired at least 1/3 of our people over the last 2 years virtually. That is what they know, how we can help them getting back into this new hybrid way of working. So I think that those are some of the reflections. I think that when it comes to some of the talking points that I would love to have your opinion as well is, I think that very important when it comes to D&I is the inclusiveness of our leadership. As I said, there's a big difference between a boss and a leader. And we need to improve our self-awareness, starting with ourselves, to really being able to appreciate the differences of other people. The other thing that I think that I would love to have a discussion around, how can we promote this community of belonging? We have changed. And in this virtual world, we have become a little bit more individualistic. How can we make sure that we, within our individualistic and our own uniqueness, we do feel part of a community. We do belong to an organization. We do identify with a mission. For example, in Novartis, we have a group, it's called the Culture Network. It's about 25 people in the organization, and they live D&I, and they're actually having conversations across the organization around some of these topics. People from all kinds of genders, all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of ideologies, and that works very well, creating that sense of community. And then I think, finally, walking the talk. It's very easy to create a diverse organization on paper, but then living it, walking it, being consistent. You can do 10 things right, but if you do one thing wrong, then people will again challenge. Are we really going towards a diverse and inclusive environment? Again, for me, it's a balance. It's not about walking on glass and eggshells, but it's about being very consistent in your symbology. What do you value? And very important, what don't you value? And then you have to act as well. I see too many times that it's easy to support people, but when we see behaviors that we don't want to see, we don't take swift action. And that is crucial. As important in celebrating the positives, but we have to act upon the negatives as well. And then perhaps two last reflections before we open it up for some Q&A. As a conclusion, I would say when I thought about this talk, D&I in the virtual world, there are two things that came to my mind, two or three. One, it's the importance of self-aware leaders. And I think that we do not invest enough in making sure that leaders understand where they come from, how they tick, what is relevant to them, how do they react towards adversity, etc. As we evolve, as we get more self-aware, again, we can appreciate much more the uniqueness that people bring to the table. So for me, that is at the basis of creating inclusive leadership. And for me, inclusive leadership has to be up there when we talk about leadership development. The other thing that I feel is that we're over-indexing on the D&I, diversity and inclusion. We're over-indexing on the D. We talk about gender, we talk about race, we talk about backgrounds, we talk about ideology, etc. So it's things to a certain extent, depending on where you are, depending on the law of your local country, you can measure. Inclusiveness is more difficult to measure. It's a culture. It's this context of how can we leverage the diversity? And that is absolutely crucial. So I think we need to over-index going forward much more on inclusiveness. And finally, as leaders, we have to walk the talk. And we have to start. It's a tough journey. It's with ups and downs, falling, but it's a fantastic journey, a lot of fun. And I feel that I've grown a lot as a leader and as a person on this journey. So with that, thank you so much, Alicia. Would love to hear any feedback or any reflections from your end or anybody that's participating.
So much, Sylvester, and I've learned so much from you during this session. We do have questions in the Q&A, but we aren't going to have time to take those. I wonder if you would be able to look at those though and respond by typing the answers. One asks, how do you manage different levels of experience and skill sets yet make people feel their contribution matters. So that's one. The other is, have you ever had to deal with the I have more experience, but I know better mentality? How do you manage diversity and inclusion leadership when facing this? Very good questions. And do you think diversity and inclusion is so critical that it influences where talent wants to work? And finally, what has your biggest challenge to making D&I something that is not cascaded top down, but that permeates the company? So 4 very good questions.
Very good questions. And I know that we're short time. I don't see a question in my chat, but so just the last one is very easy. So is D&I a talent attractor? I'm 100% sure, because I see it in my interviews, we see it in research. But even if you hire for people, it's a question that comes in. So people are very much aware, especially when you come to younger generations. And then the other one is, what was the other one?
There was also, for example, do you think it's so critical that it influences where talent wants to work?
Yeah, that's what I just answered for sure, 100%,
yes.
Especially when you go to younger generations.
How do you manage D&I leadership when facing the I have more experience and I know better mentality?
So I work in the pharmaceutical industry. There are so many people that have more PhDs and backgrounds and are much more intelligent than I am. So it is something that is on a daily basis. It's going back to making sure that we understand where we stand. What is our mission? What is our vision? How do we make sure that we align the teams behind a similar vision? And very, very important, everybody brings uniqueness to the table. It can be an expertise, but for example, I've hired in quite some people outside of the pharmaceutical industry. And we are very much an intelligent industry. Those people have brought an enormous amount of value because you don't know what you don't know. And as you give the people the space to work, so again, sometimes you need to say, hey, I understand, but can you just please wait with your opinion till the end? So I had to do that as well. I waited a lot of time to the end. So you first let them speak. That is amazing because now these people, these technical experts, start to understand what these people bring to the table. They're not a threat, they're actually contributing to them and to their own success.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that that's a very good that you just said. They're not a threat. And it's really recognizing, isn't it, that, you know, somebody who brings more to the table than you bring, that's the kind of person that you want to be involved with, because actually you're going to learn from them. Yeah. I have certainly learned so much from you today, Sylvester. I want to join your company. Please let me in. And thank you so much for your time and your contribution to LEW. It has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye. Bye.